Welcome to the 23rd season of The Fifth Estate. We begin it with a story that you could easily dismiss as fantastic, science fiction, if it weren't for the fact that the Canadian who lived it has now come forward to tell his true story for the first time. For years he was famous in the world's medical circles. Known only by the curious code name Joan, he was born a boy, but as a baby he became the subject of an experiment aimed at turning him into a girl. But beneath the curls and dresses, Joan was fighting a desperate battle. Tonight, the remarkable story of Joan and how, while still a child, he freed himself from the center of a scientific argument over nature versus nurture. And after a long and bitter fight, what he's become today. A warning, though, some of the language and descriptions in this story are graphic.
When I think about it today, it could be, I remember being very lonely and having my only friends in the whole world was my twin brother and my dog. I consider myself more of an it of anything. A nobody, an it, you know, it's like I didn't fit in anywhere. It makes you very bitter, you know, and this is a type of thing that I'm gonna live with to the day I die. There's nothing I'm going to do about it for myself. Nothing. I mean, what's done is done.
The man you are about to meet will remain hidden at his request throughout this story. This is his story, perhaps one of the most unusual ever told. The story begins 32 years ago, when the man we call John was 8 months old and about to be circumcised. The doctor was experimenting with a new technique and accidentally burnt the baby's penis beyond surgical repair.
Actually, I went into shock. And I think I was in shock for about 2 years. I didn't feel anything.
John's mother was 23 at the time. It was her first pregnancy.
I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I didn't cry. I just didn't feel anything. It was like I was frozen in time.
The family of 4 lived in a small community on the Canadian prairies. A quiet, placid existence had suddenly turned into a nightmare.
Then I thought, what are we going to do? I had thought that the male species put great store in their penises. And what was he going to do when he didn't have one?
John's mother consulted a number of doctors nearby. It was the mid-60s in a small Canadian city, and none had any solutions. The child would just have to learn to live with his almost non-existent penis. Then one day, a man on TV caught her eye.
We've been stereotyped in our view of male and female.
The man was psychologist John Money, expounding on an amazing theory. Boys, if taken early enough, could be transformed into girls by simply being treated as girls. Sexual identity was not immutable, in other words, and could be altered. It was the beginning of a whole new way of thinking. Nurture, from now on, would be more important than nature. To John's mother, it sounded incredible, but she was desperate.
So I thought, well, maybe we should give it a shot, because what else have we got?
John was only 17 months old when he and his family traveled to Baltimore to meet Dr. Money for the first time. It was a pilgrimage they would make annually for the next 9 years. John's Hopkins School of Medicine is world famous for its work on sexuality disorders. The whole notion of sexual or gender identity was developed and experimented with in this institution. First and foremost by Dr. John Money.
He saw us and he said that John was an excellent candidate for the surgery.
At the age of 21 months, the baby's testicles were removed at Dr. Money's request. What remained of his penis was left, for now, so as not to interfere with his urinary tract.
I think I'll take a scalpel as well.
The operation completed, baby John was, for all intents and purposes, dead and gone. It was now up to the parents to nurture their child into a girl.
Treat him as a girl, accept him as a girl, and go on with our lives as if John was a girl, which we relatively quickly came to accept. He was very beautiful.
John was now Joan. With long flowing curls and absolutely no knowledge of what had happened to him. Or her. The family was under strict orders never to divulge anything to anyone.
We lived our lives secretively. We just sort of grouped together as a family and did things as a family.
Joan only had one real companion, her twin brother, whom we called Jerry. The two remained close, even though they were now being brought up in two very different ways.
My husband was shaving in the bathroom, and Jerry went in, and my husband put some shaving cream on his face and a shaver without a blade in it to shave off his beard, you know. And John went in there too. He wanted to do the same thing. And I said, "You come with me. We're going to do something else with you." And I tried to show him how to apply makeup and do his hair and things like that.
The family soon left their prairie home, leaving behind those who might suspect the truth, and all the while instructing Joan how to be a proper little girl.
When I dressed him up, and I tried to dress him very feminine, I thought if I was dominant enough about him becoming feminine, it would happen.
But Joan's transformation into a girl was proving much more difficult than predicted. The child didn't like to play with girls. She didn't move or act like a girl, a strangeness her brother sensed right away.
There was absolutely nothing feminine about Joan. Got into fist fights, building forts, snowball fights, wrestling. I think the only difference between Joan and I is that he had longer hair. I remember one situation that I was really hurt. She made one friend, and she went over to this friend's house, and the mother came home, and she yelled out a loud screech and screamed, and she goes, "Get this freak out of my house."
Is freak how you felt? I mean, is that the word they would use, or is that the word you'd use for yourself?
No, that was often, well, it was many used. It was, caveman, it was freak, it was, stuff like that. And it got so bad to one point where I wound up saying, I don't want to go to school no more.
Joan felt picked upon all the time and increasingly lonely.
I could see it, but I couldn't do anything about it. And my heart bled. And I cried and cried when he was sleeping. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do for him.
And so, every summer, the family went back to see the man whose theory governed their lives. Once at Johns Hopkins, the parents would have to wait outside, while the twins submitted to unorthodox examinations by Dr. Money.
So we wind up taking our clothes off, sitting down on this couch with our hands covered on the crotch area because we were so embarrassed we're going to die and fall into the nearest crack. That's humility. You're being humiliated here. And then he'd go up to you and says, "Okay," I says, "now look between your legs."
This was Money's way of impressing upon Joan that even if he identified with his brother, he wasn't quite the same.
I think what I knew what he was trying to do, but he went about it all wrong.
John Money was a pioneer in his field, so there was no right way or wrong way of doing things in this case. Turning a boy born perfectly male into a girl was a first, a revolutionary exploration Money was eager to proceed with, but which only left Joan confused.
And then he goes over and says, do you want to be a girl? And then, from what I remember, I looked at him and said, I want to be me. It's who I want to be. I want to be me.
By the time Joan was 9 years old, he and his family had serious doubts about the whole undertaking. But not John Money. He published a report in the Archives of Sexual Behavior pronouncing the Joan study a resounding success. The child's behavior, writes Money, is so clearly that of an active little girl and so different from the boyish ways of her twin brother. In other words, the experiment had worked. The report would secure Money's reputation once and for all. No less than Time magazine devoted a full page to Money's claim of altering sexual identity, citing the Joan case as proof.
It makes it very exciting, don't you think, to live in an age of discovery of human personality this way.
Money's glowing account, however, wasn't shared by Joan.
It's not true. It's nothing further than the truth. I was a very lonely, very miserable child.
Is it possible that when you were with him, you played the game, you were exactly what he wanted you to be?
I was just being me. I mean, you know, I don't know what to say about a guy like that. I don't have no comment on that.
That report relied extensively on John's mother's own progress reports to Dr. Money, but she remembers things differently.
Dr. Money quotes you as saying, and I'll read it to you, "One thing that really amazes me is that she is so feminine. I've never seen a little girl so neat and tidy." Do you remember writing this?
No. She was not neat and tidy. I tried very, very hard to rear her like a gentle lady, but it didn't happen.
But there are those who think Money couldn't have gotten it wrong. Dr. Mayer Ballberg is a close associate of John Money. He says that if blame is to be assigned, then it belongs to the parents.
So on the parent side, probably it's somewhat an underreporting of cross-gender behavior.
In other words, the parents wouldn't have told Money about Joan's boyish behavior. But even if they had, says Mayer Ballberg, Money's conclusion remains correct.
At the time when Money was involved with the family, this child was presenting herself as a girl.
Dr. Money was eager to turn John into Joan for good reason. Money's work had so far revolved around hermaphrodites, children born with such ambiguous genitalia that it is sometimes difficult to say if they are male or female. Many such children are born every year. If Money could prove that John could successfully be transformed into Joan, then he had the answer for all the intersex children. But while Money's professional reputation grew more formidable, Joan's spirits were plummeting. The child was more and more miserable. A predicament these two men knew something about. Psychiatrist Keith Sigmundson is the man to whom Joan was sent for help when he was 10 years old. Milton Diamond is a psychologist from the University of Honolulu who's never accepted Money's idea of sex assignment.
It didn't fit with anything else that I knew.
Even though he could see how unhappy Joan was, Keith Sigmundson didn't challenge Money's theory back then. Why did you decide to go along with the fiction of her being a her and not a him?
That's the question that is always asked, and I think that as a medical scientist, I believed it was my responsibility to attempt to make this particular sexual assignment work.
But by the time Joan was approaching puberty, it was clear that the assignment wasn't working. For one thing, he was developing the thick shoulders and neck of an adolescent boy. Joan was now being heavily pressured by Money to undergo the final female transformation, the creation of a vagina.
He really wanted me to go with this surgery, and he just started badgering me. And I told him, I told him in a roundabout kind of way, I said, listen, I don't need this surgery. I don't have a problem with this. I'm fine. So, surgery is for people with heart disease. Surgery is for somebody who has got cancer and needs to be removed.
John Joan threatened to commit suicide if ever he was forced to see money again. Only then did his father break down and tell him everything.
I was crying my eyes out. I was screaming. I was yelling. And I said, I figured, I felt robbed. I was robbed.
John Joan's anger was such that he had only one thought: go back to the hospital and shoot the doctor who'd bungled his circumcision.
Well, I snuck into his office, put the gun in my pocket, and I looked at him and says, do you remember me? And he looked, and he stared, and he didn't say anything, and I looked deep into his eyes, and I says, you look a little harder. Do I remind you of anybody? And by then, I was so filled with anger. I was starting to cry, and I was mad at myself because I didn't want to cry. I wanted to kill somebody.
But John Joan couldn't pull the trigger. His anger would soon turn on himself.
I gave up plenty of times. There's only so much a man can take, and I wasn't going to take anymore.
He made 3 suicide attempts. The third, on an overdose of pills, left him in a coma.
My husband and I found John, and I said, oh my God, he's done it again. And my husband and I discussed it just for a second. What do we do now? He's not happy. He's horribly, horribly unhappy. He feels like a freak. Would it be so bad if we just let him go? And then I said, no, I can't do that. I can't let my son go. I can't let him die. And so we called an ambulance.
John Money, who had proclaimed his experiment a success, had to have known by now that things were going awry. When John Joan was 11, a colleague of Keith Sigmundson had written to Money about the child's predicament. So he was aware that things weren't going quite as well as he had previously reported.
He was.
And did he have any kind of self-doubt about his original diagnosis?
I have the correspondence, and it did not appear that there was any doubt.
With no doubts hampering Money's theory, sex assignments spread far and wide, even to remote areas like Danville, West Virginia. This is where Scott Harville was born 15 years ago. By that time, John Money's concept had become common medical practice.
What you doing, Spot?
Born with spina bifida, Scott had his penis amputated at 5 days old as doctors struggled to save his life.
Come here.
The penis was the least of their worries, since the doctors thought the baby could easily be sexually reassigned. But as years went by, the task proved not so simple for Scott and his mother. Calling him a girl's name and dressing him up in dresses and in pink and stuff, had he become a girl for you?
Not in my mind. Because, like I said, I knew my child was a male at birth. I was in school and I was sitting at the lunch table and I thought that something was just telling me that I want a girl. And when I got home, I just sat there and thought about it. I thought about it even more. Then my mama come home and she gave me a pocketbook and I threw it at her because I didn't want it.
When Scott started showing an interest in cars, and most of all girls, scandalizing many of his classmates, his mother decided she couldn't go along with the masquerade any longer. Scott was 8 when she told him the truth.
I mean, it wasn't like I was really excited or nothing. I was excited to know that I was my mind. I wasn't going crazy.
You were happy to know that you weren't going crazy. It was a relief, in other words.
Yeah.
Like John Joan before him, Scott Harville was sent to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. But Scott hadn't come here to consult the famous Dr. Money. He wanted to see anyone who could help him revert back into a full-fledged boy. Bill Reiner is the head of child psychiatry at Johns Hopkins. He's presently studying the effects of sex assignment on children like Scott, and one of the few doctors now questioning the practice of reassignment.
It's big. I have actually 3 children, but only 2 in my study group, who have switched back to male, or in their words, they were male all along. They are so clearly hardwired, if you will, male, that it's very impressive. They're very male, and they knew they were male from a remarkably young age. In fact, their stories are almost identical to John.
Doesn't that tell you that sex reassignment of an obvious male child is not a good idea, that the maleness will remain?
It makes me worry.
These people are not only worried, they're angry.
Okay, sir, we're protesting infant genital mutilation.
These are the individuals most affected by John Money's legacy. Born with ambiguous genitalia, they have been sexually transformed at a very early age. There are anywhere between 50 and 100 such children born every year. Known as the Intersex Society of America, they're demanding that sex assignment be stopped until the patients are old enough to decide for themselves.
We've now managed to connect hundreds of intersex people in North America and throughout the world.
Cheryl Chase is the president of the organization.
This is experimental, drastic intervention that is going to affect somebody's entire life in an incredibly profound way. And it's been applied almost universally in industrialized countries for close to something like 40 years. And there's been no follow-up. And the best information we have about outcomes, I think, comes from adults who are now beginning to speak out. And when doctors are confronted with this, they say, well, we are positive that all of our other patients who we have never heard from and we haven't followed are fine now. But they can't produce one.
Can you point to a similar case where the person grew up to be a perfectly successful, happy, normal female?
No, there must be quite a few such cases around with the kind of history that one could look at, but they're all kept very secret, and we have no idea what the outcome is.
Isn't that a problem in doing this kind of radical therapy? There's no real evidence.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Let me ask you this. John Joan is now saying that he grew up miserable. He didn't like being a female. He didn't feel like a female. How does that make you feel as an expert in the field?
Badly. Everybody who really deals with a large variety of intersex people has seen quite a few who are miserable. No matter what we do, there will be some that will be very miserable. Unfortunately, that cannot be a basis for decision-making, because we don't know, for instance, if John Joan had been left John at the outset, how miserable he would be with the aftermath of the penile accident as a male. We simply don't know that.
What we do know from talking to intersex adults is that a huge number of people have experienced the treatment as punishment and is horribly damaging.
Would you like one of our leaflets?
Chase has tried to drag the man behind sex assignment into an open debate.
I've written to John Money a couple of times to ask him to talk about this with us.
What has been the response?
He sent me back a photocopy of my letter with a note scribbled on the corner that said he was too busy to address the issue.
And how did you interpret that?
I think he's afraid to face up to the fact that he might have been wrong.
These days, John Money works here, in the basement of this off-campus building in Baltimore. We wanted to talk to Money about his theories.
Hello.
Yes.
We're with a Canadian television program called The Fifth Estate. We'd like to see Dr. Money.
Okay, hold on a second.
We had contacted John Money by phone and also written to him in hopes of getting an interview. But
You don't have an appointment, I'm sorry.
the fact is, John Money's sex assignment theory has come under siege of late. 20 years after the original report on John Joan, other scientists have gone on the attack. This March, a paper came out in the medical press that totally contradicts Money's earlier report. It says that, far from being a success story, John Joan never accepted the idea of being female in the first place. The authors of the report are the two men who took an earlier interest in Joan. Both now believe that the medical profession has to rethink sex assignment.
Don't cut anything. Don't remove anything. Don't do surgery until that individual can say, I prefer to be a boy or I prefer to be a girl.
If I was left alone, I would have been so way better off. You know, it's like these professionals, for some reason, I don't know why, but it seems like they get this idea in their heads that if you get destroyed in an accident, your private areas, oh, now you're nothing. So now we're going to fix you up, we're going to put you in surgery, and we're going to make you into something. Who died and made them God?
While Dr. Money avoids the glare of controversy, children like Scott are still struggling to make sense of their lives.
Scott, are your sexual interests and your sexual attractions towards girls or boys?
Girls.
Bill Reiner believes that the Scotts and John Jones of the world are not the only reason to question the practice of sex assignment. We know things today about the influence of the brain that simply weren't known in Money's time.
The penis is a very important organ in psychosexual development. And in order for a boy to come to grips with proper psychosexual development, he kind of needs to get a handle on that, if you will, literally and figuratively. What, on the other hand, John has taught us, and the children that I've seen have taught us, is that that handle is not as important as the brain's recognition of who one is.
What Scott now faces is almost as horrendous as what he went through as a baby. To regain his male sexuality, he'll have to undergo a series of lengthy operations, months in hospital, long bouts of agony and self-doubt, and he'll never be fertile. But anything is better than being who he is now.
It's pretty tough being who you are.
Yeah.
Why?
Because people usually always picks on you.
And because you wish you'd be someone else? Do you ever wish you'd be someone else?
Yeah.
Who do you wish you would be?
Anybody besides me.
Back in Canada, John Joan has pieced himself and his life together again. He's married and the adoptive father of his wife's 3 children. He's got a full-time job. More important, he's had 4 reconstructive surgeries, which, without making him as good as new, has given him his malehood back.
I look perfectly normal.
And does that mean you can have a normal sex life?
Definitely. The only difference is I cannot have children. Which is, you know, I mean, I'm not going to cry a river of tears over that, because I got 3 great kids. I got a wonderful wife. I got a good home. I think it's a nice home.
This is the first time in your whole life that you've decided to talk about this. Why?
I didn't want to do it at first, but then they told me that it's for a very good reason for my interview, that there are some people that are still doing this to other people that they did to me. And if I can help, it's great.
Helping kids like Scott is what John Joan really had in mind. Scott wanted nothing more than to talk to the one man he identifies with, John Joan. Neither had ever met someone just like them before. So last summer, in a hotel room in New York City.
Come in.
Hello.
Oh.
You're Scott. How you doing there, big guy?
Hey.
So how's things been with you? You got a lot of questions?
They had a lot to talk about.
What was going through your head when you was a girl? Was supposed to be a girl?
Well, I thought I was going crazy. Everyone wants you to conform to their way, and you're not doing it. You're conforming to your way. But what everyone has to realize, you have to live your life for you. You don't have to, you don't have to live your life for anybody else, because they're not the ones living your life. You are.
Yeah.
The two talked for hours and hours.
After a while, I was going to sneak you out and show you around.
And so, for the space of an afternoon, the two friends left bad memories and loneliness behind, took in the sights. Just a couple of guys having a good time.
Your turn. You catch.